In this video, I'll walk you through how to take raw stock prices and convert them into returns. So as you can see, here's the spreadsheet from our last video. This is the data that was downloaded using Bloomberg. So first thing I want to do is clean this spreadsheet up. I no longer need column A, so I'm going to delete that. And I no longer need row 1, so I'll delete that as well. Okay, so we have a little bit of a cleaner spreadsheet. You can see the dates just repeat itself for all of these companies, and so quickly I'll scroll down to the bottom just to make sure that I have a full data set. So it looks like all of the data came in. The next thing I might want to do is for these columns, these extra date columns, I don't need them, so I'll just quickly go ahead and delete those out. I'll just save the very first column with dates, but since everything else is repetitive, I'll go ahead and clean it up. So here we go. We have our data set. 3 years worth of data in this case, all of 2010, 2011, and 2012. And so what I want to think about, let's just think of Ford, right? What I want to consider here is what was Ford's return from January 2010 to February 2010. The stock went from $10.84 to $11.74. So what we want to think about is the percentage increase in those two values. So what I'll do is over here on the right, if you set your spreadsheet up methodically, you can just program one cell and then do a lot of copying and pasting. And so that's what I'm going to do here. So for Ford, for February, I want to understand what the increase is from 1084 to 1174. And so the way I do that is just going to be equals the current value divided by the previous value minus 1. All right, and that will give me my percentage return. So 0.08, that's an 8% return. I'm going to leave my formatting alone. Just for my preferences, I like to see it reported this way. Now, if I put my cursor in the bottom right, I get the skinny plus sign. That means I can drag that formula, and as I drag it across, it's going to calculate returns for all of my companies. And you can see at the very end here I also have included the S&P 500. There's a lot of decimal places, so maybe I'll just shorten this up to keep it limited to 3 decimals. Next, I want it for all of the observations, so I'll take that formula and bring it all the way down. And there we go. All right, we have returns for all of our stock prices, right? We took all of these values, stock prices, and converted to these values, which are returns. To keep myself from getting confused, I'm going to hide the stock prices because at the end of the day, we're not analyzing prices, we're analyzing returns. And so let's just save ourselves a step right there. I'm also, for the sake of the video, going to hide all of the observations in the middle here. That way I'm not scrolling back and forth. But you get the general idea. It goes from March 2010 to September 2012. There's 31 rows in between there. They're just hidden. And so a couple things I want to know are what's my average return, what's my average standard deviation, and maybe I'm going to want to annualize that. And annualize standard deviation. So for returns, what's the average return of all of Ford's monthly returns? So very simple. Equals average is my code. Open up my brackets, and then I highlight all of my returns. And close my brackets. So equals average, open up brackets, and highlight all of Ford's returns. So the average return was 1%. If I drag that over, it does the calculations for all of the other firms. For average standard deviation, it's just equals STDEV. All right, STDEV. Open up brackets, highlight all of my observations, and that's it. That will give me my weekly standard deviation. For Ford, it looks like it's very high, 10%, whereas the weekly standard deviation of the S&P 500 was only 4%. All right. We're also going to want to annualize these numbers, and so take this monthly observation and annualize it. The formula, I'm going to open up 2 brackets, and it's going to be 1 plus my return, So 1 plus my return. I need to annualize it, so I'm going to raise it to the, well, this is monthly data, so I'm going to raise it to the 12th power. When you do this for your weekly data, you would raise it to the 52nd power. But since we're annualizing average monthly returns, we're going to raise to the 12th power. And then last, minus 1. All right, so that formula is a little bit longer. 1 plus my return raised to the power of, in this case 12, minus 1. What's that telling me? Ford's average return, 1%. Annualized, that's 12%. The S&P annualized about 11%. Looks like Ford did a little bit better than the S&P. To annualize my standard deviation, it's going to be my monthly standard deviation times, and this is monthly, so we're going to multiply it by the square root. So SQRT, open up brackets, 12. Okay? So to annualize a monthly standard deviation, it's that monthly standard deviation times the square root of 12. If we're annualizing weekly numbers, it would be times the square root of 52. But since this is monthly, there we go. Alright, so now these numbers are going to be what we use to build our model in the latter part of this assignment. So question 3, we'll build out a full-blown model using annualized returns, annualized standard deviations. One thing I like to do to get these numbers in the appropriate format, right? That should be 12%, that should be 35%. I'll do something like this, just equals 100 times, right? That way I see the number 12 rather than 0.12. And I'll do that for all of my data. All right. Let's go back into the document. So what have we done so far? We've produced a table with, I just did in my case monthly, but you would want to go back and repeat this for weekly. I have the average and I have the standard deviation. Looks like I did not do minimum and maximum, so let's jump back in. What would be the code there? So let's say equals min. That's it. Open up brackets, highlight all my data. So the worst monthly return for Ford was 14%. The worst monthly return for the S&P was only 8%. The best monthly return would be my max here. It's going to be equals max. Highlight all of my returns. And Ford's best was 26%. S&P's best was 10%. Okay, so those are your steps here to complete Part B. Part A, graph all 6, so that's the 5 companies plus the S&P. What would be the value of $1 invested in each asset 3 years ago? Right. Choose either your weekly data or monthly data for this. So I'm going to go back into my spreadsheet. I'm going to go up top and start by creating a new column, in which case we start at $1. Right. So I'm saying I have $1, I put it in Ford. Okay. Then the very next month it goes up 8%. So what would I have? I'd have $1.08. How do I calculate that? Well, equals, right, whatever's in the cell before, in this case $1, but I wouldn't hard code it $1. So equals the very first cell where I put the amount 1, right, equals that, times 1 plus R, right, times 1 plus R, which is right here for Ford. All right, and that's my formula. So that dollar would grow to $1.08. And now I can take this, drag it all the way down. Let's do the other firms. Dollar is my starting point for each. And then let's apply that formula to everybody. All right, and so it looks like the best performer over this time period would have been Apple. a dollar invested in Apple would have grown to $2.70. The lowest performer over this time period would have been Ford. That dollar would have only grown to $1.19. So the last thing here is to create a graph of all this data. So what I want to do is unhide it so I can see everything. I want to unhide it, right? And I'm going to want to graph all of this data. So let's highlight it. So I highlighted my dollar data. Just a quick note here, if we scroll over here, I did not highlight the individual returns. This is a separate data set. We're highlighting the dollar data this time. This is actually the only time you'll use the dollar data to build this chart. So let's insert a simple line chart. And there you go. Again, we can see Apple, the outperformance for Apple right up here. Right. We can see all of the companies grew from $1 to some positive value, but Apple had the best performance over this time period.